flight from Vancouver landed 40 minutes early, and I remember thinking that was the one good thing about that day. It was a Thursday in late November, the kind of cold that gets under your coat no matter how well you button it. I'd been in Calgary for 4 days for a regional finance conference, the kind where you sit through 8 hours of presentations and eat rubber chicken at the networking dinner, and pretend you're not counting down to when you can go home. My daughter Ren was 4. I had been FaceTiming her every night before bed. The last call, Wednesday evening, she'd held up her stuffed rabbit to the camera and said, "Mama, Biscuit misses you." I told her I'd be home tomorrow. I told her I'd make pancakes Saturday morning, the ones with blueberries she liked. I got home Thursday evening instead of Friday. Surprise. My sister. I'll call her that because that's what she was to me for 31 years. My sister, even though we don't share blood, had been staying with us for 3 weeks. She'd shown up at our door in mid-October with 2 duffel bags and a story about her roommate situation falling apart. My husband Gregory had said yes before I even had a chance to think about it. "She's family," he said. And I had agreed. Because she was. Because I loved her. Because you don't turn family away. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. 2 weeks, maybe 3. She'd find a place in Toronto, get her feet under her. She had a job in marketing, she said. She was getting her life together, she said. I used my key and the door was unlocked, which was strange. The hallway light was on. I could hear the television from the living room, one of those home renovation shows my sister liked. The volume turned up loud. I could smell something cooking. Pasta, maybe? Garlic. I set my carry-on by the door and called out, "Hello, Gregory." Nothing. Just the television. I walked through to the kitchen first. There were 2 pots on the stove, steam rising. The table was set for 2. 2 wine glasses, one already half empty with red. 2. Not 3. Not a place for Ren. 2. I stood there looking at that table for a moment longer than I should have. Then I walked to the living room doorway. Gregory was on the couch, my sister beside him, her feet tucked under her, his arm along the back of the couch right behind her shoulders. They were watching television. They looked comfortable in a way that took me a second to process, because it was the kind of comfortable that takes time to build. The kind you don't build in 3 weeks. "Hey," I said. Gregory startled. My sister turned around with a smile that faltered for half a second before she fixed it. "You're home early," she said. "Where's Ren?" Gregory cleared his throat. "She went to bed a bit ago. She was tired." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7:15. Ren never went to bed at 7:15. Ren went to bed at 8:30. She always had a bath, and then stories, and then Gregory would sit with her until she fell asleep. It was their routine. She needed that routine. Her pediatrician had talked to us about it, about the importance of consistency for kids her age. I went upstairs. Ren's room was at the end of the hall. I pushed the door open quietly. The nightlight was on, the little one shaped like a moon that we'd had since she was an infant. She was in bed, but she wasn't asleep. She was lying on her side facing the wall, her rabbit tucked against her chest. When I came in, she turned over, and even in the low light I could see her face was streaked from crying. "Mama," she said, and the way she said it, like she'd been waiting for a while, broke something in me so completely that I had to press my hand over my mouth. I sat on the edge of her bed and gathered her up, and she pressed her face into my neck and cried again, quietly, the way little kids cry when they've already cried themselves, almost empty. I held her and I didn't say anything for a long time. I just held her. When she calmed down, I asked her what happened. She was 4, so the story came out in pieces. She'd wanted a bath and nobody came. She'd come downstairs and they'd told her to go back to her room. She'd been hungry. She'd eaten some crackers she kept on her nightstand for some reason that only made sense to a 4-year-old. She'd cried until she was tired. I tucked her back in and I sat beside her bed on the floor until she fell asleep for real. It took about 20 minutes. Then I went back downstairs. Gregory and my sister were in the kitchen now. She was draining the pasta. He was pouring more wine. They had the ease of people who'd been doing this together for longer than 3 weeks. I pulled a chair out from the table and sat down. "We need to talk," I said. My sister looked at Gregory. Gregory looked at the counter. And that was the moment I knew. I don't know how to describe what that knowing feels like. People talk about gut feelings, but it wasn't in my gut. It was in my throat. This certainty that sat there like something I'd accidentally swallowed. I thought about all the small things from the past 3 weeks that I'd explained away. Gregory coming to bed later than usual, the new distance in the small conversations we had in the morning before work, my sister's habit of standing in the kitchen in my bathrobe when I got home. I said, "How long?" My sister set the pot down. Gregory said my name like it was a warning. I said, "How long has this been going on?" He said I was misreading the situation. She said nothing. And him saying that you're misreading the situation was the thing that made me absolutely certain I wasn't. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark for a while. Then I picked up my phone and texted my closest friend, Ada, who lived 20 minutes away in Scarborough. I just said, "I need you to call me when you can." She called in 4 minutes. I told her what I'd come home to. I told her about Ren on the floor eating crackers alone. She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Okay, do you want to come here tonight?" And I said yes. I packed a bag for myself and a bag for Ren without turning on the bedroom light. I went back into Ren's room and I picked her up, still half asleep, her rabbit in her arms. She put her head on my shoulder and didn't wake up fully. Gregory was in the hallway. He said, "Where are you going? You can't jest." I said, "Don't." I walked out. I put Ren in the car. I drove to Ada's. My sister didn't come out of the kitchen while I was packing. Ada had the guest room made up and a cup of tea waiting. She took Ren from me and settled her in the bed without waking her, the way only someone who loves your kid can do. Then she came out and sat with me at her kitchen table and let me talk. I talked until 2 in the morning. By the time I stopped, something had clarified in me. Not healed, not even close, but clarified. I knew what I needed to do next. The next morning, I called a family lawyer. Her name was Catherine, and my colleague at work had used her 2 years prior for a separation. She came highly recommended. I met with her Friday afternoon while Ren was at Ada's with Ada's daughter, the two of them watching movies in their pajamas. Catherine was straightforward. She asked for the facts, and I gave them. We talked about our marital property, our joint accounts, the house in East York that we'd bought 4 years ago, 18 months before Ren was born. She asked if I had access to our financial records. I said yes. That weekend, I went through everything. I had always handled our personal spending. Gregory handled the household accounts. That division had seemed practical at the time. He was better with spreadsheets. I was better with day-to-day budgeting. But sitting there at Ada's kitchen table with my laptop, I was understanding for the first time what better with spreadsheets had covered. Over 14 months, Gregory had transferred approximately $47,000 out of our joint savings account. Not all at once, in amounts small enough not to trigger any automatic alert we had set up. Transfers of $800 here, $1,200 there. Once a single transfer of $3,500 that he had logged in our shared notes app as roof estimate deposit. There was no roof work. I checked the notes. There was no contractor. There was no estimate. $47,000. I sat with that number for a long time. I did not confront him. Catherine had been very clear. Document everything first. Talk to no one in the situation. Make no accusations until you have everything in order. The moment you tip your hand, she said, you lose the element of clarity. Right now you know more than they think you do. Keep it that way. So I did. I printed everything I could access. Bank statements, the shared account history, the notes app, screenshot. I sent copies to Catherine, and I kept a copy on a USB drive that I kept in my jacket pocket. I also emailed my employer's HR department and let them know I might need to adjust my schedule temporarily for personal reasons. I work in financial compliance at a mid-sized firm downtown. My manager was understanding. She told me to take whatever time I needed. I stayed at Ada's for 8 days. On the ninth day, my sister called me. I didn't answer. She called again. I didn't answer. Then she texted, "Can we please talk? I think there are things you don't understand about the situation." I read that text about 6 times. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and went to play with Ren in the backyard. Catherine had told me not to engage. "Anything you say becomes information they can use to build a narrative," she said. "Stay quiet and let me work." I was very good at staying quiet. I had been good at staying quiet my whole life. It was, I think, partly why things had gotten this far without me noticing. 3 days later, Catherine called me. She had been in touch with a financial forensics consultant who worked with her firm. He'd looked at the transaction pattern. There were additional accounts I hadn't known about. A line of credit in Gregory's name only, opened 6 months after we bought the house, and a secondary credit card that had been used for, among other things, a hotel in Montreal, flights to Victoria, 2 restaurant bills at places I'd never been. None of it was in my name. I'm not going to pretend I was surprised. I think some part of me had suspected for longer than I wanted to admit, and the $47,000 was just the shape that the suspicion finally took. Catherine filed the separation papers 11 days after that first meeting. Gregory called me the night they were served. He said he wanted to explain. He said there were things I didn't know. He said he still loved me, and that what had happened was complicated, and that he didn't want to lose our family. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "I know about the line of credit. I know about the secondary card. I know about Montreal." I paused. "Catherine will be your point of contact from here. Please don't call me again." He went quiet. Then he said very softly, "How did you find out about Montreal?" I didn't answer that. I hung up. My sister made one more attempt. She showed up at Ada Street. I still don't know how she knew I was there, and knocked on the door on a Saturday morning. Ada answered. I watched from the top of the stairs. My sister asked if she could talk to me, said it was important, said she was worried about Ren. Ada told her I wasn't available. My sister stood on the doorstep for a moment and then left. I went back to Ren's borrowed bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Ren was at the kitchen table downstairs with Ada's kids eating cereal. I could hear them laughing about something. I sat there and I listened to my daughter laugh and I just breathed. I found a rental in Leslieville through a colleague, a 2-bedroom on a quiet street, second floor of a house, good landlord, in-unit laundry. The kind of place that felt like a fresh start without trying too hard to be one. Ren's room had a window that looked out onto a maple tree. She called it the red tree because she picked it in autumn when the leaves had turned. We moved in on the 1st of December. Setting up that apartment, putting Ren's drawings on the refrigerator, finding a spot for her rabbit collection on the windowsill, buying the little blue bath mat she picked out herself at the Canadian Tire on Queen. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It took me a while to name it. It was steadiness. Just that, nothing dramatic. Just the feeling of standing on ground that belonged to me. The separation agreement took 4 months to finalize. Gregory was cooperative in ways I hadn't expected, which Catherine said sometimes happened when people realized the paper trail was not in their favor. The house sold in February. We split the equity. The $47,000 was addressed through a financial settlement that Catherine negotiated without me ever having to be in the same room as him. My sister got a sublet in Parkdale. I know this because a mutual friend mentioned it once, and I didn't ask for details. I haven't spoken to her since the doorstep. I have thought about her, though. You don't share 31 years with someone and just stop thinking about them, but thinking about someone and letting them back into your life are 2 different things, and I've gotten better at knowing the difference. Ren started junior kindergarten in September. On her first day, she wore the little corduroy jacket we'd found at a thrift shop in Leslieville, the one with the embroidered flowers on the pockets, and she carried her backpack like it was the most important thing she'd ever done. At drop-off, she turned around once at the classroom door to make sure I was still there. I waved. She waved back, then walked in. I stood in the hallway outside the classroom for longer than I needed to. Then I walked out into the September morning and got in my car and sat there for a minute with my hands in my lap. I wasn't sad. I want to say that clearly because I think I spent a long time confusing sadness with the feeling of something ending. What I felt was closer to the opposite. Like something had finished that needed to finish, so that something else could begin. I drove to work. I bought a coffee from the place on King Street where they know my order. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop and started my day. That was 7 months ago. Ren still has the rabbit. She's made 2 best friends at school, a girl named Priya, and a boy she describes only as the one who brings the good snacks. She sleeps through the night now, which she hadn't always done in the months right after everything happened. She asked me once, in the car, why we didn't live in the old house anymore. I told her that sometimes families change shape, and that our family, her and me, was exactly the right shape for us. She thought about that for a minute. Then she said, "And biscuit." "Yes," I said. "And biscuit." "Yes," I said. "And biscuit." I still make the blueberry pancakes on Saturday mornings. Some things you keep because they're good, not because they connect you to anything. We eat them at the kitchen table under the window. And in the mornings now the maple tree is full of sparrows, and Wren counts them out loud, and I drink my coffee, and I listen to her count. I keep coming back to the table, the one set for 2, the wine glass already half empty, the pasta on the stove. That image has stayed with me longer than any of the harder ones. Longer than the bank statements, longer than the hotel receipts, longer than Gregory's voice on the phone asking how I'd found out about Montreal. The table was set for 2 because, in their minds, there were only 2 people in that house who mattered. Ren didn't have a place at it. And I think that's the moment everything became clear to me, even before I knew the rest. What happened to me didn't happen because I was unlucky or careless. It happened because I had been too willing to trust without paying attention. I handed over pieces of my life, the household accounts, the financial oversight, the assumption of good faith, without ever really looking at what I was handing them to. That's not self-blame. It's just honest. There's a difference between being betrayed and being naive, and I was some of both. What I've learned is that paying attention to the small things, to the things that feel slightly off, to the version of events that's just a little too convenient, is not paranoia. It's intelligence. It's the kind of clear-eyed awareness that I didn't have enough of before, and that I've tried to practice every day since. Catherine told me something in our first meeting that I've thought about often. She said, "The facts are already what they are. Your job is just to see them." That's harder than it sounds when the facts involve someone you love, or thought you loved, or built a life around. But she was right. The moment I stopped trying to explain things away and just looked at what was actually in front of me, the table for 2, the sleeping child, the missing $47,000, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I did it. Not without fear. Not without grief. But I did it anyway, and that matters. Ren asked me once if I was sad. We were driving home from school, and she asked it the way 4-year-olds ask things. Directly, without softening it. I told her that I had been sad for a while, but that I wasn't anymore. She thought about that and then said, "Because we have the red tree?" And I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like weeks. "Yes," I said, "because we have the red tree." There's something in that. The ability to keep going. Not dramatically, not with some grand gesture of reinvention, but just quietly, day after day, is something I don't think I fully understood until I had to actually do it. It's not about being strong in the way people mean when they say you're strong after something hard. It's more ordinary than that. It's waking up and making the pancakes. It's sitting with a lawyer and reading bank statements. It's packing a bag in the dark without turning on the light. It's choosing, again and again, in very small ways, to keep building something real. Wren counts the sparrows in the maple tree every morning. She's up to 11. She tells me very seriously that there used to be 9, and now there are 11, and she wants to know where the new ones came from. I don't have an answer for that, but I like that she's paying attention.